We're back to Isaiah, and we're especially looking at Isaiah 18 and 19 today. But a few weeks ago, I think at the introduction to a sermon, I just mentioned a particular email that I'd gotten, and there's two friends in America and and we've just for a couple of years now been having long email discussions. I mean, we had been out of touch for like literally 20 years, and can't even remember now what happened, and we just kind of got back in touch, and now we have sort of long email discussions about all sorts of things. But one of my friends has had a really bad year, and what he wrote a few weeks ago that I mentioned was, I need a path, I don't see it. And I just used that in relationship to what's going on at the time of Isaiah, where things were quite dark and discouraging for people. And I imagine most people, maybe even Isaiah, even though he's a prophet of God and, sometimes had faith in God, I imagine if he was a normal human being, there are times when he just wondered if God was really there and wondered if there was a path forward. And of course, Isaiah is the book of the path forward in the midst of darkness. This week, this is what my friend wrote when we were kind of wishing one another Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. What he said is, here's hoping to 2019 be better than the great blank storm of 18. And, on Sunday morning, I won't fill in the blank, but that was his assessment of this last year. It was a very, very hard year for him. Professionally, it was a pretty good year. But there are different things he was dealing with at home. He and his wife were fostering some kids, one of whom was like 16 or 17 and just kind of went over the edge, and police had to get involved. So it was a bad year for him. And so this was his kind of end of the year, hoping this next year somehow won't be at least as bad as the previous year. I'm hoping that for most of us here, this last year wasn't quite that bad. But I imagine most of you have faced some kind of discouragement or difficulty. I mean, especially I'm thinking many of you who have, you've come to Latvia this year. You've made a huge change in your life in the last 365 days. And maybe it's a good change, and maybe it's mainly exciting. But it's still, you had to overcome some difficulties to be here right now. Maybe a series of difficulties, and maybe some of you are thinking, did I make the right choice? Should I just go back home or to whatever you're doing before? It might be even a lot of little not so bad changes, but too many changes building up. It's like, that's enough change. I can't deal with this right now. And so you might be thinking, is change possible, and can the new year be different? If this last year was a year that you do not want to relive, is there actually any hope that anything can be different, and that 2019 won't be the great blank storm that maybe your previous year might have been? But that's what we're going to kind of be looking at as we look at Isaiah 18 and 19, and especially chapter 19. I want to remind you of kind of the background and show you this map again. The last sermon from Isaiah was from chapter 9, and we probably won't have any sermon on those intervening chapters, the last 10 chapters of Isaiah. But part of what is happening in those chapters and in Isaiah is a series of prophecies about some of the smaller nations surrounding Israel and Judah, like Moab and Edom and Aram, and those smaller nations, and they were all kind of involved in different kinds of intrigues and plots and plans, all of them trying to survive politically and trying to find allies who survive politically, and sometimes wanting to get rid of this king to get a more favorable king in. So there's just a lot of disorder in society, a lot of fear. This kingdom, small kingdom of Judah now, was surrounded by a lot of maybe allies, but potential enemies. So there's a number of prophecies about some of those small kingdoms, but when we get to Isaiah 18 and 19, the prophecies are going to focus on Egypt and even further south, what's called in Isaiah the land of Cush, or around Ethiopia, which is dominating Egypt. And then we're going to return to stories about Assyria. And so I remind you what's going on. You have the up-and-coming kingdom or empire of Assyria to the north of Israel. Very powerful, wanting to grab as much land and money as possible. Very, very wicked. Not just, okay, we'll just take your land and then we'll kind of be nice to you as long as you bow down to us. They were just terrible, terrible people and did terrible things to the people that they conquered. That was Assyria. Okay? So that was the big threat, but then there's also Egypt, which is no longer quite the power, but then, of course, some of these kingdoms, if they can ally themselves with Egypt, maybe they'll have a big enough army they can hold off. The Assyrians and the Egyptians are very glad to use these kingdoms, give them a little bit money, maybe some extra troops, because they want to Egyptians want to keep the fighting up there and away from their own borders. Okay? But often, kings of Israel would look to Egypt for help. And so that was one of the sources of trust. Can we trust Egypt? Maybe they will be our ally. We need a big power. Maybe those Egyptians will help us. And that was one of the temptations for Israel and Judah to look to Egypt as a source of trust. And the more trust you put in Egypt, the less trust you're putting into your own God. But anyway, that's what's going on. The danger of a false trust in Egypt. And so Isaiah turns to, or God gives Isaiah kind of some prophecies about Egypt that are mainly going to be negative, to say, don't trust in Egypt. Egypt too is going to be judged. Egypt will not stand. Egypt cannot be a source of trust for you. So there are these prophecies that are mainly negative, but then a surprising prophecy in chapter 19 that we'll focus on. Chapter 18 is a short chapter. I want to look at this briefly, even though there's a lot of details that, people who are much better scholars than I am are not exactly sure what's going on in detail in this prophecy. But, all of you know how it is when you're listening or using a language that's not your own. You can get the gist of a message even if you don't understand all the details. So we can get the basic idea of this prophecy even if there's questions about what's going on. So woe to the land of whirring wings along the rivers of Cush, south of Egypt, down the Nile River, which sends envoys by sea and papyrus boats over the water. Go, swift messengers, to a people tall and smooth-skinned, to a people feared far and wide, an aggressive nation of strange speech, whose land is divided by waters. Again, the Nile River and the tributaries, that's the land divided by waters. And the people down there were known as tall people. All you people of the world who live on the earth, when a banner is raised on the mountains, you'll see it. When a trumpet sounds, you'll hear it. This is what the Lord says to me. I'll remain quiet and will look on from my dwelling place, like shimmering heat in the sunshine, like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest, a cloud of dew that isn't going to last. Okay, it's going to pretty soon just be gone. The heat of day is going to just evaporate that dew away. For before the harvest, when the blossom is gone and the flower becomes a ripening grape, he will cut off the shoots with pruning knives and cut down and take away the spreading branches. They will all be left to the mountain birds of prey and to the wild animals. The birds will feed on them all summer, the wild animals all winter. This prosperous land along the Nile River will just be overgrown and it'll be for wild animals. It's not going to be a power. It shouldn't be your source of trust. It's simply what that prophecy is about. But what's really cool and so poetic, and if you're reading Isaiah, try to have an ear to just the poetry, the beauty of the language. It's just amazing literature. Even if you have a hard time believing it, it's just, incredible words that are used and images that Isaiah has. And suddenly, verse 7, at that time, and in the next chapter we're going to see repeatedly, in that day or at that time, at that time, at that time, it's some time to come. Gifts will be brought to the Lord Almighty. And now you see the same words that were used here, the people that you should fear, but you can't really trust. But actually, this is God's intention for those people. Gifts will be brought to the Lord Almighty from a people tall and smooth-skinned, from a people feared far and wide, an aggressive nation of strange speech, whose land is divided by waters. The gifts will be to Mount Zion, the place of the name of the Lord Almighty. These people who are both fearful but not a source of trust, one day they themselves also will be bringing gifts to the God of Israel. Pretty incredible reversal, a surprising turn of events. The great blank storm of the previous year is not going to be what the next year is going to be like. So that's in very brief what all of chapter 19 is about. I mainly want to focus on Isaiah chapter 19. It starts off this way, an oracle or prophecy concerning Egypt. Behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and is about to come to Egypt. The Lord, the God of Israel, is coming to Egypt. And he's the Lord of all the earth, and the gods of Egypt are going to be shown to be no gods. And so what it says, the idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence, and the heart of the Egyptians will melt within them. The idols, they will be no things, the nothings of Egypt. These idols, these false gods, they're nothing. They're just physical figures in some temple, but they're empty. They mean nothing. They have nothing. They have no power. They're nothing. And there's an interesting play on words. This word for idols or the no things is Elohim. And that's almost definitely in contrast to Elohim. Elohim is a word for God. Okay, for instance, if you remember Emmanuel, God with us, you see that word, the root word El in Elohim, that's God. So for Israel, Yahweh is our Elohim. But in Egypt, all they have is just an Elohim. These nothings, these idols, they're nothing. They're not gods. It's just an interesting play on words that Isaiah has here to say they're nothing. They're not a source of hope. They're not a source of trust. Don't fear them. Don't look to them. Just forget them. They're nothing. They're non-entities. And then the next part of chapter 19 is going to give us a sad story in Egypt of social breakdown and economic ruin and political foolishness. Again, keep in mind, part of the point of this is reminding Israel, don't trust in Egypt. Don't look to them for hope or help. They cannot be your source of hope. Don't look to those kinds of powers. So they need this reminder of who they're going to put their trust in. In verse 2 of chapter 19, I will incite Egyptian against Egyptian, social breakdown. They will each fight against his brother and each against his neighbor, city against city and kingdom against kingdom. Then the spirit of the Egyptians will be demoralized within them, and I will confound their strategy, so that they will resort to idols and ghosts of the dead, and to mediums and spiritists. Moreover, I will deliver the Egyptians into the hand of a cruel master, and a mighty will rule over them, declares the Lord God of hosts. Yahweh Elohim declares that this is what's going to happen to them. There's going to be social breakdown. Now, one of the things we need to listen to as we're looking Isaiah 19 is just, it's not just about something going on 3,000 years ago. It's not just about ancient Egypt. Isaiah 19 is an amazingly contemporary story. And you can see this repeatedly. I mean, brother against brother, each against his neighbor, and the political polarization in the world just gets more and more extreme. You just, every day you listen to the news or you look at social media and you see people who once were friends, unfriending one another on Facebook. I've done it myself. But I'm just saying, it's not just 2,000 years ago. It's a description of how life is constantly. And then there's economic ruin. So in the prophecy it says, the waters from the sea will dry up, and the river will be parched and dry, and the canals will emit stench. Again, think of Egypt, the Nile River, the waters coming into it. If that dries up, then life is gone. I mean, if the Nile River dries up, it's just desert. The source of life in Egypt is the Nile River. It's like a god to them. And if that river dries up, then it's going to be economic ruin. The streams of Egypt will thin out and dry up. The reeds and rushes will rot away. The bulrushes by the Nile, by the edge of the Nile, and all the sown fields by the Nile will become dry, be driven away, and no more. The fishermen will lament, and all who cast a line into the Nile will mourn. Those who spread nets on the waters will pine away. Moreover, the manufacturers of linen made from combed flax and the weavers of white cloth will be utterly dejected. The pillars of Egypt will be crushed, and the hired laborers will be grieved in soul. The entire economy of Egypt will just be destroyed. Again, it's all dependent on the river. Everything that they make is from what grows by the river. And when the river is gone, life is gone. Social breakdown and economic ruin, and then political foolishness. And once again, this isn't just about, Egyptian rulers 3,000 years ago. The description, you might think, wow, that really sounds like this person or this person in this country or that country. The princes of Zoan, one of the chief cities in Egypt, are fools, mere fools. The advice of Pharaoh's wisest advisors has become stupid. How can you men say to Pharaoh, I am a son of the wise and a son of ancient kings? Well then, where are your wise men? Please let them tell you. Let them understand what the Lord of hosts has purposed against Egypt. One of the reasons they can only be foolish is they can only see what they can see in front of them. They have no idea what God has in mind for their land. And without knowing what God has in mind for them and their land, they can only be foolish. They can only be foolish. The princes of Zoan have acted foolishly. The princes of Memphis are deluded. Those who are the cornerstone of her tribes have led Egypt astray. The Lord has mixed within her a spirit of distortion. They have led Egypt astray in all that it does, as a drunken man staggers in his vomit. There will be no work for Egypt, which its head or tail, its palm breech or bulrush may do. In that day the Egyptians will become like women, and they will tremble and be in dread because of the waving of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he is going to wave over them. And the land of Judah will become a terror to Egypt. Everyone to whom it is mentioned will be in dread of it, because the purpose of the Lord of hosts, which he is purposing against them. So this is a prophecy of Egypt and why it's foolish to trust in Egypt, because they are led by foolish leaders, and their economy is going to be turned over, and the entire fabric of society is going to come apart. Don't trust in Egypt or anything like Egypt. And so there's a series of these kind of prophecies about Egypt that are very, very negative. Now here's the thing I want us to keep in mind as we keep going, is that this is not mainly about Egypt. So certainly don't read in, contemporary Egypt into this. Nothing I'm saying today is about present-day Egypt and Egyptians, except to the extent it's about all nations and all peoples. And what we see going on 3,000 years ago or more is still it's just how the world works and the danger of putting your trust in the world. And then in a moment, we're going to turn to Assyria. It's not about Assyria. Assyria doesn't even exist anymore. But what Isaiah is going to say about Assyria is going to teach us amazing things about God. About who God is and what he is doing in the world and what his intentions are for people. People like the Egyptians or people like the Assyrians or people like, and fill in the blank, any other people or nation. This is about God's intentions for them. I found an interesting quote in a commentary, and I know some people are afraid of reading commentaries because you think of, especially Old Testament experts as being, very dry and so forth. But, sometimes there's a lot of things we can learn from Old Testament scholars. But this is what one commentary said about this prophecy in Isaiah 19. Egypt stands for the Gentile world. Again, it's not mainly Egypt. It's just a symbol of the whole Gentile world out there, heading into irreversible decline. Its real problem is divine opposition, and yet no sins are specified such as would explain the Lord's hostility. And that's true in this prophecy. It's just these bad things are going to happen, but Isaiah doesn't say, here's a list of all the things you've done to explain that. Okay, so why is God set against Egypt? In a word, we have here the situation first seen at Babel in Genesis 11, where humankind's determination to be the solution to their own problems and to run the world without God automatically comes under disapproval and counterattack. I mentioned, and I think John mentioned in the first sermon on Isaiah, that what we're going to have is, in Isaiah, is the work of a doctor, that's sometimes going to hurt. It's going to be painful. He's going to poke and pry, and pull blood out and maybe cut something open. And it's going to be necessary to fix what's wrong. And part of the work of a doctor is to diagnose what is wrong. And this is a diagnosis of what is wrong with Egypt and what is fundamentally wrong with the world. And it's actually a diagnosis that what is actually wrong even with people who are otherwise good. I mean, there's a lot of not so bad people out there that don't do a lot of terrible things. But the fundamental problem is, our problem is we are determined to fix our problems on our own. In the end, we primarily want to be the master of our own life. Even if we're good people, maybe especially if we're good people, we figure, we don't really need help. I'm not such a bad person. I'm not real stupid. I don't commit all the bad sins. I can probably be the master of my life. And that's the fundamental problem with humanity, is our belief that we can be the master. And fundamentally, we've got to kill that idea that we can be the master. We just have to accept the fact there's going to be another master, and we just have to choose the right master. So that's Egypt and Assyria. Even Assyria's problem is not their wickedness, so that's going to come up plenty of times later. But it's mainly they just want to live life on their own and be their own masters. They can solve their own problems themselves. We don't really need God too much. We'll have a temple maybe, and on Sunday morning or whenever people back then went to worship, we'll do that. But the rest of our lives, we don't really want God to be a part of our life. That's the problem, not just with Egypt, with the world. But divine opposition is not the last word. It's not the last word. And the last part of Isaiah chapter 19 is just an amazing reversal, an unbelievable reversal. And once again, as I read it, I think there's no other God like this God, like the God that's going to be presented. No other God who sees people, even rebellious people, like our God sees people. Why choose any other God than the amazing God that we know through the Bible? In that day, and there's going to be a series of in that day, and if you're reading through Isaiah, you're going to see that repeatedly. In that day, and there might be a lot of negative things, but suddenly in that day, something is going to be different. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt. Not just in Israel or Judah, not just in Jerusalem, an altar to the Lord, Yahweh, not just any God, the Lord God of Israel, that God. There's going to be an altar to that God in the heart of Egypt and a monument to the Lord, Yahweh, at its border. It will be a sign and witness to the Lord Almighty in the land of Egypt. When they cry, when Egypt cries, when the Egyptians cry out to the Lord because of their oppressors, He will send them, the Egyptians. God will send the Egyptians a Savior and a defender. He will rescue them, the Egyptians. God will rescue the Egyptians. Not just Israel, the Egyptians. God will rescue them. So the Lord will make Himself known to the Egyptians, and in that day they will acknowledge the Lord. They will worship with sacrifices and grain offerings, and they will make vows to the Lord and keep them. The Lord will strike Egypt with a plague, like He has done every other land, including Israel. He will strike them and heal them, striking but healing, just like a doctor. Maybe causing pain, but for the purpose of healing. All this judgment, all this punishment, its purpose, its direction, is for healing. That's what God is doing. That's the heart of God. That's the plan of God. And they, the Egyptians, will turn to the Lord, and He will respond to their pleas and heal them. In that day, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. Again, think of that map. You know, the highway from Assyria to Egypt led through Israel, and it was mainly a highway that armies would trample on to get to more cities to destroy. But this is a different kind of highway with a different purpose. In that day, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. The Assyrians will go to Egypt and the Egyptians to Assyria. The Egyptians and Assyrians will worship together. The Egyptians and the Assyrians will worship together. Fill in the blank with any other nation. I mean, just think of the last, the first part of this century or the previous century, and all of you could come up with a list of nations that, that will go down in history, at least at that point in time, of the terrible atrocities committed. And you can fill in the blank, these people and this land and this war, and they did this, and they wiped out these millions of people, millions of their own people and millions of other people, just like the Assyrians. So fill in the blank with any of those nations. It's not about Egypt and the Assyrians. Again, Assyria doesn't even exist. Okay, it's not about the Assyrians. It's about what God can do and God's purposes in history. The Egyptians and the Assyrians will worship together. Of course, not just worship any god. It is true that it's It's Yahweh, the Lord God of Israel, that they must worship. Okay, it's not just we'll all worship our own gods. No, they're going to be unified with the worship of the one true God, but they will worship together. And in that day, Israel will be the third, along with Egypt and Assyria. Assyria, Israel, Egypt. All three of them, they've been fighting one another all through Isaiah's time. But they'll be together, a blessing on the earth. A blessing on the earth. Assyria, how is that possible? The Lord Almighty will bless them and say, "Blessed be Egypt, my people." Blessed be Egypt, my people. Really? Assyria, my handiwork. Surely not. Surely God will not claim the Assyrians as his own. Those should be the people, God will wipe his hands of, and I have nothing to do with them. It's their responsibility. They're not my people. Blessed be Egypt, my people, Assyria, my handiwork, and Israel, my inheritance. If you were with us last year and at a time when we were looking at the book of Genesis and the importance of the word blessing and the promise to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, and God promises these blessings to Abraham, but also says, "You will be a blessing, and you, all the nations of the earth, will be blessed." Even Egypt and Assyria will be blessed and will be a blessing. Belonging and participating. This shows their full value to God. They're going to belong to God, and they're going to be part of God's project, part of God's plan, and be a blessing. Egypt and Assyria. And once again, the amazing thing is Egypt and Assyria, they're not just outsiders, they're enemies. They're enemies of God and enemies of God's people. And especially the Assyrians, just absolutely wicked. They're enemies. And yet God can change even that, and is willing to change even that, and is willing to claim the Assyrians as his own, and to be in relationship with them, and to bless them, and to let them be a blessing. And my simple point is simply that if this is God's intention, if this is something God has in mind to do, then we can trust God with this next year. However bad this last year might be, we can trust in God's good intentions. And of course, I can't make any prophecy or promise about what it's going to look like or when it might change. I mean, for my friend who's hoping that 2019, is going to be better than 2018, I hope it'll be better, but it's not going to be a perfect year for him. I mean, the things he's got to deal with in his circumstances, they're not going to just suddenly, tomorrow night at midnight, suddenly be fixed. Okay, I'm not saying that. But can he trust in God? Can he believe in God's good intentions? That even in the midst of this storm, that God's intentions are good. This is from Habakkuk, another Old Testament prophet, the very end of this book. Though the fig tree should not blossom, and there be no fruit on the vines, though the yield of the olive should fail, and the fields produce no food, though the flock should be cut off from the fold, and there be no cattle in the stalls. And that might describe your life in the coming months. Things might not suddenly look better and better. Yet I will exult in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. Even in the time of the fig trees not blossoming and no fruit. In this picture, when it's just this side of the picture and there's nothing here. Yet I will exult in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. That's my encouragement to us this morning, is to hold on to this and to choose this in the new year, believing that God's heart is to fix all that is broken, to turn even enemies into friends, to bless his enemies, and to make them a blessing. That's the God that we have. That's the God that Israel was meant to trust. Not the nothings, but this God, Yahweh, Lord God of Israel. This is what I want to do today to finish up our service. Maybe this will be a little bit easier because we're a smaller group of people. I want to have a prayer time. I want us to pray for one another, and I don't want to make it too uncomfortable, so I won't make you get into little groups necessarily, though that might be a good idea, but I won't make you do that, or even necessarily pray out loud. But this is what I want us to spend some time doing, to pray for one another in this room. I mean, the physical people in this room, and often, you bow your head and close your eyes when you pray, and if you want to do that, you can do it that way, but I'd encourage you maybe now to pray with your eyes open, looking around, and just for about 5 minutes, look around the room and just pray for different people that you see. You don't even have to know their name, okay? I mean, if you want to just look at them, then bow your head and pray for that person, and then pick another person. You don't have to know the person. If you know the person, you know specific things about them, pray for them. But just, especially this, pray that in this year, the person you're praying for will do this in spite of circumstances. That will exalt in the Lord and rejoice in Him no matter what. That we will hold on to trust in God. So let's do that again. Yes. Well, I'm if you want to, but no, I'm just thinking to yourself. So just, again, I don't want to make it too uncomfortable. Just, see someone and just bow your head and pray silently for that person, and then see another person and pray silently for that person. So that's more what I have in mind. I mean, if any of you feel compelled to pray out loud, no one's going to stop you. If the Spirit leads you to pray out loud, then do that. But just, pray for one another, for as many as you would like to. Let's just see people in this room now and pray for them now.